Hello everyone, welcome to TALRadio. This is me, RJ Sankhya, hosting through the interview today. Most of us enjoy forests and those brisk walks in the nature, but we hardly think of ways to conserve them. And people who form communities and fight for environment are the rare heroes among us. And one such heroic organization is Rainforest Action Network. So to talk about this wonderful organization, I am delighted to have Zanne Garland on the show. So Zanne is the Development Director of Rainforest Action Network, RAN, a non-profit organization dedicated to protecting rainforests and the rights of their inhabitants with nearly 2 decades of experience in the field. Zanne has been a powerful voice in the fight against deforestation, climate change, and environmental degradation. And through RAN, she has worked with communities, grassroots organizations, and campaigners to hold corporations and governments accountable for their actions and to promote sustainable solutions. So without a further ado, let's welcome Zanne Garland onto the show. Hi, Zanne.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Okay, I'll begin with the question. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in environmental activism?
Yes. So I've been fundraising for over 20 years now. And RAN is the first environmental activism place I've worked. I've worked in the environmental sector, working on land conservation and carbon sequestration in soil and thinking through opportunities for us to better conserve land through economic incentives. And I've also worked in anti-poverty advocacy in my history. So combining the advocacy and the environmentalism that I have in my background and coming to RAN and fundraising here for such incredible work that Rainforest Action Network does has been a really exciting career move for me.
Wonderful. So tell us a little bit about Rainforest Action Network and what are its missions and values?
Yeah, so at its most basic level, RAN is for people and planet. We are people power, challenging corporate power, and we run inside-outside campaigns to protect forests and climate while centering human rights. And so what that means is we have relationships with some of the highest decision makers at corporations and talk to them about the policies they should be setting. But if they're not going to set those policies and if they're not going to be held accountable for those policies, we work with media and activists and organizing opportunities to put outside pressure on corporations to make changes to protect forests and protect climate. The human rights component is really important because the best stewards of land are typically frontline and indigenous communities. And so we work in partnership with those communities to ensure that their land sovereignty is held as one of the most important components of our work.
Wonderful. So can you tell us about some of the major environmental issues that RAN is currently focused on and how is the organizing addressing it?
Yeah, so RAN does everything in networks. And so a lot of the things I'll talk about are all done with partners across the entire environmental movement. One of the things that RAN is particularly uniquely good at is corporate campaigning. So it doesn't mean that we don't get into the fight to have big, important legislation set. But one of the things we're dealing with in the environmental movement as a whole is that some of these multinational corporations don't have enough regulation and they're doing a lot of destructive things around the world. And so our strategy is to go into corporations and have them set new standards, not only for themselves, but for the whole sector. So one of our biggest wins and one of our kind of best stories to exemplify how this works is the Disney campaign that we ran in the early 2010 timeframe. And we noticed that Disney was destroying rainforest for their publishing. So Disney, as you may know or may not know, is a big publishing company. They're, I think, in the top 5 of all book publishing companies in the world. They were sourcing their paper products from rainforest. And we decided that that was a really important place to put some pressure on one company to change the sector's connection to how they source paper. Within 18 months of negotiations and campaigning, they agreed to a worldwide policy to eliminate rainforest destruction, not from just their books, but all of their paper products around the globe. There were back and forths with their executives, but also we did demonstrations. Like one of the ones that I think was the most effective was having a campaigner or an organizer dressed up as Minnie Mouse in front of Disney World who got arrested for protesting in front of Disney World. And so that's the kind of visual that Disney does not want to have, and it's not the reputation that they want to have. And so it's important for us to take brand damage into account as a lever of power and allow a lever of an ability for an organization that's pretty small compared to the juggernaut that is Disney and the other corporations we're up against, to be able to have an ability to help them change their behavior. This has happened in a number of campaigns that we've run against. For example, Home Depot was another big one where they changed their behavior based on our inside-outside campaigning with executive conversations and pressure and protests and media stories that talk about what these corporations are doing that are destroying our planet.
Wow, that is surprising to me because Disney has always been this nice, friendly, approachable kind of thing. But wow, thanks for the new perspective. So, Ariane has also been involved in several high-profile campaigns, right? Like including the targeting corporations like Chevron and Cargill, if I'm right.
Yes.
So can you share some insights into how Ariane approaches such campaigns and what its success have been like so far?
Yeah, that's a great segue, because one of the things we have shifted to in recent years is not just going after the fossil fuel and construction companies like the Chevrons and Cargills of the world, but also looking at who their enablers are. So in order to build a new fossil fuel expansion project, a company like Chevron needs lending, so money from banks, insurance from a big insurer, and a permit, so kind of government support of that project. And so what we've looked at is, how do we put pressure on the banks to not finance these initiatives? How do we put pressure on insurance companies? How do we put pressure on the government? But less so the government. That's a lot of other organizations that do that work. And one that we've worked on recently is in the insurance field. It may seem not as obvious that insurance companies are a big kind of enabler of fossil fuel expansion, but because it's one of the three components of what they need, sometimes they need insurance before they can even get a permit. It's something that we thought, okay, if we work with these other organizations in a coalition called Insure Our Future, we can put pressure on insurance companies to stop insuring fossil fuel expansion. And Chubb is the biggest North American insurer. We worked on a campaign with them for the last 2 years, if not longer, to ask them to change their policies and their behavior, and then ultimately change the sector as a result, because they're the biggest North American insurance company. In March, they became the first major insurer to set a policy to limit oil and gas extraction projects. And then immediately following that, they declined to insure a project in the Arctic because of this new policy. So it's a good sign in that a lot of companies will kind of say they're going to do something that's environmental and then just not do anything, or do the opposite in some cases. This policy, while it doesn't go far enough, it did actually gain enough traction to have them make a decision based on the policy. And so it's a good sign that the insurance industry as a whole is beginning to take responsibility for itself and its role in the expansion of fossil fuels.
Great. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that RN has faced in its campaigns and how the organization has overcome them?
Yes, actually, as I alluded to in the last answer, a lot of companies we've seen, because of public pressure, because of public information, because people understand that corporations are in this capitalist structure where their bottom line goal is profits, and they don't care as much about the extraction from people and from the planet. they've started making commitments. So a number of banks made net zero commitments, especially kind of around the Paris Agreement, the UN kind of meeting in 2015. And it was exciting at the time because net zero commitments by 2050 meant that we thought they were going to stop financing fossil fuels because the International Energy Agency has indicated we don't need any more fossil fuel extraction to be able to make a just transition to a clean energy economy. And the banks decided to say, okay, we're going to make these commitments and say that we're going to do these things. Well, since the Paris Agreement, banks have both invested more money in deforestation companies as well as fossil fuel companies than they did before. There have been literally trillions of dollars since 2015 financed into the fossil fuel expansion work. And so I think one of the things we're up against is this idea of greenwashing, the fact that, banks have much bigger abilities to connect with, big PR firms and get the word out that they're doing the right thing, even as we know they're not. And the reason we know they're not is that RAND recently in April put out a Banking on Climate Chaos report. This report is in its 14th year and indicates how much money exactly is going from banks into fossil fuel companies. And so we see the money, we track the money, we transparently connect with the media about it, and then they continue to say that they're investing in green alternatives when they're not.
Perfect. So my next question is, RAN is for protecting forests, also fighting for climate, and also upholding human rights. So how are these three interconnected, or why is it these three things that you guys are doing it together?
That's a great question. And we just put out a case study about the Longisoon community in the Borneo. And there's this huge tract of rainforest in Indonesia that we're working directly with the community there to keep intact. They're under threat from companies trying to expand their timber operations as well as their palm oil operations. So we're working with the community directly because we know that Indigenous communities have the longest term sustainability interest in that land to stay intact and stay conserved the way it is. And so preserving their land sovereignty, preserving their human rights, not allowing companies to get away with land grabs is really the most effective way to work in coalition with people who are in a lot of ways most affected by climate change, and also in order to have effective strategies because they know who's coming into their land. They know the regulations. We can work directly with them to achieve the same goals and preserve the same forest. It's a different strategy than other conservation organizations who might decide to buy land. We're more interested in people who have land and have land that they've conserved there for generations to be able to maintain those land rights and be able to maintain the sustainability of that biodiversity of the land that they're on.
All right. So coming to the donations part, I see there's, different options available, like one-time donation, monthly donation, and also something called Protect an Acre, and also Climate Action Fund. And there are other ways also to give. So can you explain about each of these and how can a potential donor approach you guys?
Yeah, thank you for that. One of the things we get asked about a lot is, it sounds like all these companies are doing bad things. Should I just stop buying Oreos or move my money to different banks? And, we let people know that is meaningful. You can stop buying Oreos, which are made with palm oil, and hopefully that'll make a difference. You can move your money from one of the banks that's funding fossil fuels and get it into a bank that doesn't or has better policies. And funding RAND, funding this movement, funding organizations that are doing this work can enhance and leverage your ability to speak, truth to power and get the word out there that there are ways that we can make the entire sector change with people's support. So that's how we like to give people an ability to join us. They can join us by taking action. They can join us by signing petitions. They can join us by giving. We raise our entire budget philanthropically every year. So right now, we're about a $10 million organization. and are growing because of the increased needs to address these issues. And so being a sustainer, giving monthly is really huge because, as I said in a couple of these examples, these campaigns to get these wins can take years. So people investing in us for the long term makes it possible for us to make these changes happen, especially at the company and corporate level. In addition, like you mentioned, Protect an Acre and community action grants, we give away last year we gave away about $875,000 directly to Indigenous and frontline communities to support their work. So in a lot of cases, that's in partnership with them. So we will, be working with a group that needs funding and we can support them in their work. And that supports all of our collective work. Or if we aren't working with them, but know about a group that needs funding that's an Indigenous or frontline community that we have connected with or we know something about, they can ask us for this support or apply for this support and we give it away. So donors can also give directly to that program. They can protect an acre knowing that the money that's going into the Protecting an Acre is going to an Indigenous frontline community.
All right. So this is before we leave the interview, this is going to be the last question. So this is going to be a little personal. I want to know what wakes you up for the work and what puts you to sleep, making you feel really satisfied about the work that you do that day. So can you tell us something?
Yeah, I think working in kind of an anti-capitalist group that is fighting kind of some of these bigger corporate powers is hard. And I think that what, fulfills me is that this work is really powerful. The amount of change that we've seen at Rainforest Action Network and the increase in, support both from funders and from organizers and from people who understand how important and critical it is in the next 5 years to stop the globe from warming the kind of 1.5 degree Celsius that was set forth by the UN. We know that we have a short time frame, and I know that short time frame requires resources. And so in my role as the development director and my role to ask people to support RAN, it's exciting to know that the money is going to a movement that is working and a movement that is growing. So it's really exciting work and I really love it. And it keeps me going even as some of these greenwashing tactics or, even as forest, degradation continues to happen at the hands of these corporate powers.
Wonderful. So thank you so much, Zanne, for taking time for us. And it has been a wonderful interview. And you are indeed a very wonderful and pleasant, and I really find you very energetic. So I really love taking interview with you. And we need more powerful people like you, who fight for such large purpose. So keep up the good work. And thank you again for taking the interview today.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to the interview. It sounds like Touch of Life Radio is doing great work in getting the word out about a lot of interesting and engaging and important work that people are doing across our field. So really appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit more about Rainforest Action Network with you today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again for taking time and have a nice day.
You too. Thanks so much.
So that was Zanne Garland, Developmental Director at Rainforest Action Network. I hope you find this interview insightful. And for more such interviews, stay tuned to TALRadio, powered by Touch of Life Foundation. And this is me, Sankhya, signing off for today. Take care, you all.